My name's Luke. I'm 26, and until recently I was still living with my parents. It wasn't because I lacked ambition. I had a remote job that covered my bills and let me save a bit each month. Still, if you asked my dad, he'd call me a freeloader who played on the computer all day. He's old school, the kind who thinks real work means manual labor for 10 hours straight. At first, it was small jabs at dinner, snide comments like, "How many cartoons did you watch today?" or "Must be nice not to have a real job." I laughed them off because it kept the peace, but the remarks didn't stop. Meals became a running critique of my job and my so-called millennial work ethic. My mom didn't step in either. Sometimes she added digs about how I should network more like our cousin Tyler, who's always bragging about sales commissions. I told myself they just didn't understand remote work. I tried to convince myself it was fine. My dad would come home, crack open a beer, and within minutes, find something to criticize. "You're still here. Don't you ever go out? You're not going to meet a nice girl staring at a screen." Or, "If I hadn't let you stay, you'd be on the street." It felt like he needed me to be small so he could feel bigger. The actual breaking point came one Sunday after dinner. I was scrolling on my phone when he slammed his hand down and announced, "Starting next month, you'll pay to live here. If you want to act like an adult, pay like one." He said it loud enough the silverware rattled, and my mom agreed. I didn't argue. Something inside gave out. I smiled, genuinely, and said, "Sure, no problem." That night, after everyone went to bed, I packed my car with what mattered: my laptop, clothes, a few keepsakes, and my guitar. No shouting, no dramatic farewell. I drove off, found a cheap Airbnb for the week, and didn't call or text. For the first time in years, I woke up without the usual background noise. No dad yelling at the dog, no mom clanging pots. It was quiet, almost too quiet, but it felt peaceful. A week later, just as I was settling into the calm, my phone buzzed. A text from Mom. "The mortgage is due. Where are you?" I stared at it. The mortgage? The phrasing didn't read like concern. It felt like accusation, like I'd abandoned a responsibility. The truth was, I had been contributing quietly for years. Monthly transfers that weren't labeled rent, but added up. I never complained because I believed it helped keep the house running. I didn't reply immediately. 5 minutes later, "Mom, Luke, answer me. Your father is furious." I laughed, but not happily. More the laugh you make when a person's character proves your point. Of course he was furious. Furious that I hadn't begged to stay. I went about the day, worked my remote shift, finished projects, treated myself to takeout from a local diner. That evening, a text from Dad. "You think you can just walk out? You're still responsible. You live under my roof. You help pay for my roof. Don't make me take legal action." I didn't respond. The audacity struck me. The same man who pressured me to pay or leave was now demanding money after I'd chosen to leave. 2 days later, Mom called repeatedly until I picked up. "Luke, thank goodness. Listen, we need to talk about the house." I kept my tone neutral. She hesitated. "Your father and I counted on your contribution this month, and since you left, we had to use our savings. We can't keep doing that. Your brother already said he won't help." Ah, my brother. He's 3 years older, married, makes about double what I do, and is the household golden child. He never had to do the chores I did. If he messed up, Dad shrugged it off. If I was 5 minutes late, paw. I got a lecture on respect. I asked calmly what that had to do with me. Mom sighed and said we all have to do our part. Your father says that leaving doesn't mean you stop being family. If we lose the house, it will be on your conscience." That line hit hard. I'd been paying quietly for years, and now, for prioritizing myself, they framed me as the potential cause of their financial trouble. I didn't argue. I said, "I'll think about it," and hung up. The messages didn't stop. Each day brought a new tactic. "Mom, your father's blood pressure is up. He's worried sick." "Mom, we raised you better than this. You don't abandon family." "Dad, I knew you'd never make it on your own. Wire the money by Friday." It felt like guilt, shame, and fear were being used to pull me back in, or at least keep the money flowing. One night, my brother called. "Luke, what are you doing? Mom says you left with no notice." I fired back that they could hardly expect me to be the only one footing everything, especially when he lived comfortably with his wife and never had to chip in. He changed the subject. "Just send them something, okay?" That left me angry. Always me who had to compromise to keep the peace. This time, I wasn't giving in. A few days later, I got a voicemail from Mom that made my jaw drop. "Luke, your father says, if you won't contribute, we might have to sell the house. This is your childhood home. I hope you can live with yourself when it's gone." I listened to it 3 times, furious. They were shifting the blame onto me, the one who had actually been contributing. That night, I opened my laptop and pulled up 2 years of bank records. Every transfer was there, neat rows showing I had been doing my part. My savings had taken a hit for it. A small idea formed. Maybe it was time to stop defending myself and start taking action. But I still didn't respond. Part of me wanted to see how far they'd go. Sure enough, the next morning Dad texted, "Your brother is coming by tonight to talk some sense into you. Be ready to explain yourself." I stared at it and felt something change. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of disappointing them. I wasn't a teenager awaiting a lecture. I began to think this was about control as much as money, and I had taken mine back. That's when things escalated. The classic move: send in the apparently reasonable sibling. I expected my brother to come over, sit me down, and try to shame me into compliance with that patronizing tone he uses. But I wasn't at the house. That evening, my brother texted, "Where are you? I'm here at the house." I replied, "I don't live there anymore. Not my problem." He warned, "You're making this worse. They're talking about drastic measures." That phrase set my nerves on edge. The next morning, I woke up to a bank notification, a large transfer out of my account to my parents. I thought at first it was fraud. Then I remembered a year earlier, my dad had convinced me to link my account to theirs for convenience. I'd trusted them. Now over $1,000 had been taken without my permission. It felt like a punch, not just for the money, but for what it signified. This had moved past guilt and manipulation. It was, effectively, theft. I called Mom. She answered cheerfully and, when I asked, admitted they had taken it because Dad didn't want to miss the payment. "You've always been responsible, Luke. We knew you'd understand." I told her they'd stolen from me. She snapped back that family helps each other and that I should be grateful. After all, the house would be mine one day. I hung up. The betrayal washed over me. Years of quietly sending money, biting my tongue during dinners, and this was how they repaid me. I couldn't focus on work. I kept replaying the transfer and imagining them congratulating themselves for solving the problem. That night, Dad texted, smug, "Glad we could take care of that. Next time, just send it on time and we won't have to do it ourselves." 2 hours later, my brother called. "Luke, I heard about the transfer. Just let it go. They need it more than you do. I shot back that he and his wife had just returned from a week in Cancun, and that he never gets asked to help. He replied that I was being selfish and making them sick with worry. I surprised myself by saying coldly, "Good." Then I hung up. I didn't want to hear it. Lying in bed, I had a realization. This was about control. They were trying to dictate my life even from a distance. I started collecting evidence. I pulled every transfer into a folder and took screenshots of the messages where they mocked, guilted, or threatened me. By sunrise, I had a record. Not to show anyone yet, but to prove to myself that I wasn't imagining a pattern. The next day, I called the bank and removed their access to my account, set a new password, and felt a calm I hadn't felt in years. For the first time, my money was actually mine. 2 nights later, a group text arrived. "Mom, Dad, brother. Family meeting tomorrow night. Be there at 7. This isn't optional." I stared at it, and my pulse quickened as I stared at the screen. They were planning something. I could sense it. And whatever it was, I knew this meeting wasn't about making peace. I didn't want to go, but a stubborn part of me needed to hear their words directly, not through calls or texts. I hadn't told them where I was staying. I just arrived at the house at exactly 7 p.m., parking across. Yet now it felt like hostile ground. When I walked in, the air was heavy with tension. Mom sat stiffly on the couch, hands clasped like she was in church. Dad was in his recliner, already scowling. My brother leaned against the wall, arms crossed, keeping his usual neutral stance. "Sit," Dad barked. I sat. Silence lingered before Dad spoke. "Do you know what you've done to this family?" I stayed quiet. "You forced us to scramble for money at the last minute because you decided to run away like a child," he said, his voice rising. "You embarrassed us. The neighbors keep asking where you are. Do you know how that feels?" I finally answered. "Do you know how it feels to be mocked in your own home every night? To be told you don't have a real job when I've been paying my share?" Dad's face turned red. "We were trying to motivate you." "Motivate me?" I laughed bitterly. "You took money from me." Mom gasped. "Luke, don't twist things. We only took what you were supposed to give. That's not stealing." "Yeah," my brother added. "You're making them sound like criminals." "Because they are," I said flatly. Dad slammed his hand on the chair. "Watch your mouth. If you're sitting under my roof, you'll show respect." That phrase again, "under my roof." In that moment, I realized he would never see me as an adult, as long as he had that roof to hold over me. "I'm not under your roof anymore," I said quietly. Silence. Mom's face crumpled. "Luke, this is your home. Where are you even staying? Some motel? You can't live like that." "I'm fine," I replied. Dad snorted. "You think you're independent? You think you can just walk out? You'll come crawling back. The world will eat you alive." That was my breaking point. I stood, heart pounding. "Maybe it will, but I'd rather take my chances out there than stay here and be treated like a bank account with a heartbeat." I walked out before they could reply. "Luke, don't be stupid," my brother called. But I didn't turn back. I sat in my car for a long time before starting the engine, gripping the steering wheel until my hands ached. My chest was tight, tears filling my eyes. It wasn't just anger, it was grief. That house had always been home, no matter the conflict. But now, it felt like a place I could never return to. That night in my rented room, I didn't sleep. I lay awake, replaying every word. For years, I had tried to earn their approval, to be the good son. And for what? The moment I stood up for myself, they turned on me. By morning, something in me had hardened. I researched my rights, wanting to know if they had any legal power to demand money. They didn't. Without a rental agreement, they had no claim. I also secured my bank accounts with alerts for any attempted transfers. Then, out of spite, I totaled up my contributions to the household over 3 years. The number shocked me. It was enough to cover several mortgage payments. Proof that I hadn't been freeloading, as Dad claimed. I saved the file in my evidence folder. But the next week was hard. Nights felt empty. I'd scroll through old photos, family barbecues, holidays, birthday cakes on the same kitchen table where we'd just fought, and sadness would creep in. Mom texted once, "Your father hasn't been himself. He says you broke his heart." I didn't respond. The next morning, I saw my brother's post online. A brand new flat-screen TV in their living room, captioned, "Early Christmas gift to ourselves." My jaw clenched. They had money for that, but not for the mortgage? That sadness hardened into anger. Over the next days, I moved quietly. I opened a new bank account at a different institution, slowly transferring savings. I updated every password, email, cloud storage, everything. I told no one. For the first time in my life, I wasn't reacting to them. I was acting on my own terms. Still, I knew they weren't finished. But something had shifted. For the first time in years, I felt free, not just from criticism, but free to imagine a life where guilt and fear didn't dictate my choices. The first step was stability. The Airbnb was temporary and costly. After searching, I found a small studio across town. It wasn't glamorous, creaky floors, a leaky faucet, but it was mine. Signing the lease felt like a turning point. I could finally live on my own terms. I built routines, waking early, making coffee, sitting by the window, working, then cooking simple meals for myself. It wasn't fancy, but it was fulfilling. At first, I expected them to show up, but weeks passed, and apart from the occasional text, "The house is falling apart without you. Your father says you'll regret this." Then something unexpected happened. My manager reached out. "You've been doing great. Let's talk about expanding your role." A week later, I had a promotion and a raise. Not only was I earning more, but I finally had proof that my work mattered. Proof I wasn't just playing on the computer, like Dad always said. That raise changed everything. I upgraded my workspace, invested in a second monitor, and started saving seriously. My apartment became less of a hideout and more of a home. The mental shift was even bigger. I joined a gym, something I'd never had the confidence to do. At first, it felt awkward, but soon I enjoyed the progress. I also began meeting people, neighbors, coworkers. Chris, a neighbor, invited me to a game night. Sitting there, laughing over pizza with new friends, felt like another world compared to the constant tension at home. One evening, I opened my evidence folder. The bank records, screenshots, voice messages. For the first time, I didn't feel nervous or defensive anymore. Instead, I felt steady, even empowered. What once looked like a pile of painful memories now felt like leverage. Quietly, I started consulting a financial advisor, asking about my options if I wanted to formalize my role in supporting the house. He was surprised when I laid out the situation. You've been paying thousands toward a property you don't own, with no agreement in place? Depending on circumstances, that could be viewed as a form of co-ownership. That word stuck with me. Co-ownership. I had never considered that all the money I put in might give me some legal standing. Meanwhile, my parents' messages grew more desperate. Mom, we had to dip into retirement savings again. This is killing us, Luke. Dad, you think you're punishing us, but you're punishing yourself. When we're gone, you'll regret this. I didn't respond, but I saved every text. One Friday evening, my brother called. I almost let it go to voicemail, but curiosity made me answer. Hey, he said, his tone strangely subdued. What do you want? I asked. Look, I know things are tense, but Mom says they're struggling, really struggling. She wanted me to ask if you'd move back in until things settle. I laughed. Move back in after everything? That's not happening. They promised they'd stop with the comments. They just need you. They don't need me, I replied. They need my money. There was a long pause before he said, You've changed. Yeah, I answered. I have, and I had to. By spring, I had built a small emergency fund, refreshed my wardrobe, improved my health, and picked up freelance projects. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. One Saturday, I drove past my parents' house. The grass was overgrown, the porch light broken, and the paint was peeling. It looked worn out. For years, I had been the one mowing, fixing, and maintaining. Now, without me, the neglect showed. I parked nearby, watching. Part of me felt sad. It was still the house I grew up in. But another part of me felt sharper, even electric, because now I had choices. I had resources. And I was beginning to see that I didn't have to let them dictate the ending to this story. I could write it myself. That thought lit a fire I hadn't felt in years. The image of the house stayed with me for days. Seeing it decline without me was bittersweet. I cared about the memories, but another part of me welcomed the sight. It proved how much weight I had been carrying all along. Around then, my company launched a new leadership program for remote employees aiming for management roles. Normally, I might have hesitated, but something in me was different. I applied, and to my surprise, I got in. The program offered mentorship, training, and a raise. Overnight, I went from a mid-level remote worker to someone with real influence. That's when the messages from my parents shifted. Mom, your father is thinking about selling the house. We can't afford payments anymore. Dad, if you cared about this family at all, you'd help us keep it. At first, I ignored them, but curiosity got the better of me. If they were serious about selling, that changed everything. I looked up public property records for the first time. The shock wasn't just the mortgage balance, it was the refinancing history. They had refinanced twice in 5 years. No wonder the payments were so high. They'd been pulling equity out of the house. I sat there, staring at the numbers, my heart pounding. This wasn't just about bills. They had used the house like an ATM, funding trips, improvements, maybe even my brother's wedding. And yet, I had been made to feel guilty, like I was the problem. I dug deeper, through old conversations, emails, anything I could find. The picture became clear. I hadn't just helped with expenses. I had subsidized their lifestyle. That realization fueled me. I called the financial advisor again and told him what I found. If you can prove your payments went directly toward the mortgage and not just general costs, you might have a claim to equity, he said. A share of equity. I couldn't stop repeating it. For years, my father had used the house to control me. My roof, my rules. But if I had a legal claim, maybe it wasn't only his roof anymore. At work, things kept improving. My manager put me on a high-profile project with a bonus. Combined with freelancing, my savings grew quickly. For the first time, I saw a future of true independence. Then came the breaking point. One afternoon, I got an alert from my bank. Attempted transfer blocked. The sender? My parents' joint account. They had tried to pull money from me again. I almost laughed. They hadn't learned. Instead of confronting them, I forwarded the email to my advisor with the note, "Add this to the file." That night, I sat at my desk and outlined what I jokingly called Operation Get My Life Back. Step 1. Secure my finances. Step 2. Document everything. Payments, texts, withdrawals. Step 3 was still forming, but it would involve the house. I also spoke with a lawyer, at first framing it hypothetically. She didn't buy it. If you can prove consistent contributions and weren't a tenant, you might pursue a partition claim, she explained. That would mean forcing a sale of the house and taking my share of the equity. Meanwhile, my parents acted like nothing had changed. "Mom, we're hosting Easter dinner. You should come." "Dad, bring a check with you." I didn't reply. Instead, I circled Easter on my calendar and wrote one word beside it: leverage. In the weeks leading up, I pulled credit reports to ensure nothing had been opened in my name. Thankfully, everything was clean, which boosted my confidence further. By Easter, I wasn't planning revenge, but I was ready to show I was no longer the same person they could manipulate. That morning, as I adjusted my collar in the mirror, I realized something. I wasn't returning as the dependent child. I was walking in as someone they could no longer control. When I arrived, my mom greeted me warmly, as if nothing had happened. Dad sat at the head of the table, stern but not openly hostile. My brother gave a quick nod. Dinner began as usual. Ham, mashed potatoes, small talk. But eventually, the topic came. "So," Dad said casually, "since you're here, we should talk about the house." I set my fork down. "Yes, we should." That threw him off. "I've been reviewing some numbers," I said, pulling a folder from my bag. "Do you know how much I've contributed over the last 3 years?" Dad frowned. "This isn't about—" "It is," I interrupted firmly. I slid a spreadsheet across the table, rows of transfers, with a final total circled. Mom's eyes widened. "Luke, this is—" "Enough to cover months of mortgage payments," I finished. "And yet you treated me like a freeloader." Dad stiffened. "That's not the point. You live here, you pay. That's the rule." "Not anymore," I said calmly, "because according to my advisor, these payments may entitle me to equity." The room fell silent. My brother leaned forward. "Wait, what?" "That's right," I said. "I've documented everything. Payments, messages. You yourselves called it help with the house." "That could be viewed as shared property contributions." Dad's face turned red. "You wouldn't dare!" "I would, and I will if necessary." Mom tried to soften it. "We're just asking for a little help." "No," I said sharply. "You're asking for control, and you crossed the line when you tried to take money from my account without permission." Dad slammed the table. "We had no choice." "Yes, you did. You could have asked. You could have treated me with respect. But you didn't. And if you keep pushing, a judge will hear every detail." My brother studied me. "You're serious, aren't you?" "Completely." I gathered my folder and stood. Before leaving, I placed one last document on the table, a certified letter from my lawyer, outlining my potential claim. Then, I walked out without looking back. Driving away, I felt something I hadn't in months: control. This wasn't about revenge, it was about boundaries, and I wasn't done yet. In the following weeks, I executed my plan. I closed the joint linked account, moved my savings to a new bank, and set up a small trust in my name. Then, I sent one final message to the family group chat. All communication about money will go through my lawyer. Do not contact me directly about payments, loans, or contributions again. The effect was immediate. My mom sent dozens of messages. My dad stayed silent. A week later, my lawyer called. They've responded. Let's just say they're eager to avoid court. Good, I said. Let's set the conditions. For the first time, I wasn't reacting. I was setting terms. And it became clear they had underestimated me for years. 2 weeks after Easter, my lawyer called again, sounding almost amused. They've agreed to a written settlement. No unauthorized withdrawals, no more demands. In return, you won't pursue a partition claim for now. And they've acknowledged in writing that your contributions went toward the mortgage. It was everything I wanted. Legally documented, untwistable. I signed immediately. But the fallout came soon after. A month later, my brother told me Dad had listed the house for sale. They couldn't keep up with payments without my help, and my claim had been the final straw. They're furious, my brother said. Mom's been crying nonstop. I'm not celebrating, I replied, but I'm not apologizing either. You really scared them. Dad says you made him feel like a stranger in his own house. I laughed bitterly. He made me feel like a stranger for years. Now he knows what it's like. A few weeks later, I drove past one last time. A for sale sign stood in the yard. The lawn was uncut, the porch light still broken. The house seemed smaller now, like it had lost its power over me. I parked across the street, memories flooding back. Holidays, barbecues, laughter, then the guilt and endless conflicts. And then I smiled, because I wasn't angry anymore. I had stood my ground and walked away with dignity and freedom intact. A month later, the house sold. My parents moved into a smaller place. I didn't visit. One evening, Dad sent me a final text. You got what you wanted. I hope you're happy. I stared at it before replying. I never wanted the house. I just wanted respect. He never answered. That night, I sat on my balcony, watching the city lights. My new life stretched ahead, brighter, freer, fully mine. I raised my glass, whispered to myself, your roof, your rules? Not anymore. And with that, I leaned back in my chair, letting the quiet settle in, knowing no one would